Interview on today. Karl Stefanovich, the Prime Minister, joins us now. PM. Good morning to you, Prime Minister. Good day, Karl Stefanovich. You are being called a modern-day Bopok this morning. How does that sit with the veritable PM? Prime Minister, well, you take lessons from everywhere, and particularly at a time like this. I mean, Australians are facing some of the biggest hardship we have seen outside of wartime. We have got to try new things. We have got to do whatever we can to get people back into jobs. And I think what we have demonstrated, particularly say through the National Cabinet, is where we can bring people together from different perspectives. We can achieve some pretty amazing things. We are now seeking to do that in the workplace, just getting employers and employees together, bosses and workers, others who are involved in that process, to see what they can agree, so we can get people back into work. Stefanovich, can you do a deal like Bopok though? I mean, do you honestly believe that all these parties, these mortal enemies, will come together and smoke the peace pipe? Prime Minister, well, I hope so, and there are no guarantees. And I think everybody is going into it with their eyes wide open, but we have got to give it a go. Because making jobs is what this economy needs. It is what Australians need right now. So many have been put out of work and on reduced hours. And to get our economy moving again, then you have got to get things right in the workplace so those businesses can be successful. If businesses can be successful, they can create jobs and they can pay wages. But everyone shares in that, and everyone has a responsibility in it. And there has been too much conflict for too long. It's time to put down the weapons and get into a room and work through some of these hard issues that in the past perhaps people haven't pursued him as effectively because the economy was going much more strongly. Well, it is under a massive test now, and we can't afford that complacency anymore, and we can't afford to hold on to things that at the end of the day just don't matter as much as people getting work. Stefanovich, see, I don't want to be a prophet of doom, but I have got Daryl Kerrigan pulsating through my head saying, tell him he is dreaming. Prime Minister, well look, perhaps I am, but you have got to in this circumstance, Karl. Because the country is up against this massive challenge, and if that dream involves that people might work together in workplaces to create jobs and secure better incomes for people into the future, and we come out of this crisis as strong as I believe we can, then that is a dream worth having. Stefanovich, okay, good answer. Unions are pushing to extend JobKeeper and JobSeeker schemes. Are you willing to extend those in order to get those industrial relations reforms done? Prime Minister, well, that isn't part of the discussions. What they're talking about is 5 key areas, and I will be really quick to explain them. The whole issue of casuals and full-time work. The awards, which is what most people working in small and medium-sized or apprentices work off, the enterprise bargaining system, ensuring people get paid properly, and compliance. And a lot of these new investments in greenfield areas on those new sites, that those investments can go ahead. Because there's certainty in those areas, are the 5 areas that they are working on, and that's where I have asked him to come together. The government will be considering those other broader issues as we go to the budget later this year, and of course in the months ahead. But right now we want to focus on what is happening in the workplace itself and how we can make those businesses work better so they can create more jobs and people can have greater certainty of employment and the conditions. Stefanovich, but you know only too well that is going to be a horse trade, Prime Minister. And it is going to be traded, and it's going to be discussed between those who have the most skin in the game, and that is the people who work in these businesses and the people who run these businesses. That's where it has to stem from. It is not a discussion between politicians posturing about industrial relations and beating the chests or whatever it is. It is about people who have the most at stake, and they're the people who work in these businesses and the people who run these businesses and own these businesses. That's where we have to get the commonality. They have been going down two separate grooves for too long, and we need to get him together. We have booked the hall, and they will get in there and they will have the discussions. Let's see what happens. We have got our eyes wide open on this. We know it is a huge challenge. And maybe it will come to nothing, Carl, but what I do know is as a government we can't afford to not endeavor to have this process be successful. Stefanovic: yeah, I like to hear that you booked the hall. That's good. Well, the premiers meantime don't really care what you say on the borders, do they? What, why haven't you been able to convince them it is safe to open the borders? Prime Minister: well, the National Cabinet has never agreed that there should be borders closed in Australia. That was never the medical expert advice that came at any time. Premiers and the governments in states, whether it is South Australia, Western Australia, Tasmania, Queensland, have all made their own decisions, and so they have got to justify those decisions. There is no doubt that those sort of borders do harm the economy, they do harm jobs, and it is important that we get those removed as soon as possible. Stefanovic: they are not listening, are they? Prime Minister: they will take their own health advice in their own states, but I want to stress the national medical advice that came from the expert panel that has driven all the other decisions never recommended closing borders. Stefanovic: okay, given the terrible diplomatic relations between Australia and China, have you reached out to your counterpart Xi Jinping to sort it out, or are we heading for more trade heartache? Prime Minister: well, look, I would simply say this, Carl. And Australia has only ever acted in our own national interests, and we have only ever acted in a way that has not sought to be offensive in any way, shape, or form. And I would simply ask, what offensive steps has Australia taken in relation to this relationship? And my answer is none. We are being ourselves. We have always been consistent about what we say. We say it in private and we say it in public. So it is an important relationship. We will continue to work that relationship honestly but on the sure ground of Australia's national interest, and we will never resile from that. Stefanovic: they seem pretty offended if we haven't done anything. Prime Minister: well, it is for others to explain to me what the offence is. I mean, Australia has simply acted in accordance with our national interests. We have acted as a good global citizen, whether it comes to multilateral trading forums or indeed through the World Health Assembly. None of our actions have been targeted in any way, shape or form at China. It's been, we have a partnership with them. We are living up to that partnership. Stefanovic: one final question. The Sharks are back this weekend, but your club has been rocked by a drug scandal involving young gun Bronson Xerri. Quite the blow for you and the club, huh? Prime Minister: well, it is very disappointing. That process is still ongoing with Asada, so I will let that play out. I mean, he was a very talented young player, there is no doubt about that. He's as quick as lightning. This is very disappointing, and look, I feel for the players and the club, but there is no tolerance for drugs in sport. And Asada should do the job, and they should follow that through, and there are no exceptions. It would appear, and I hope it is not the case, but it would appear that he has made some very poor decisions. I hope that that is not the case. Stefanovic: Prime Minister, on an upward note, and thank you for agreeing the other day that the Broncos would take out the premiership. I appreciate it. Prime Minister: well, it is good to have the footy back on. Alison Langdon: tell him he is dreaming. Prime Minister: that's a dream I will let only you have. And a few Broncos fans too, I suspect. Stefanovic: okay, I'm happy to have that dream. PM: thank you for your time today, appreciate it, thank you.